is what's the difference? Is there a difference between a smart city and a resilient city as we look towards the future?
Thanks, Jeff. It's an interesting question, and I would tend to speak that to think that smart cities is actually a digital arm to resilient city. And let's take a few examples. I hope that the slides are coming. The first example I would like to use is Singapore. And to make the link, Singapore is one of the most advanced cities in terms of investment in technology. And last time I was there, I asked a taxi driver, why is it that you're here? And he said, because it's safe. And I asked, is it public safety? And he said, no, the weather is safe. So when it's raining, we can still go and work. The food is safe. When we eat, we are not sick, as opposed to some other places in Asia. And the water is safe. You can drink tap water in Singapore, where you cannot drink that elsewhere. And even the work is safe too, because if you're out of a job, you find another one, compared to people obliged to move elsewhere if they're out of a job. I said, how is it possible? And he said, because technology is there and is helping, and the government is driving that. So as an example for Singapore, they are investing heavily into smart infrastructure in the city, deploying sensors, deploying networks, connectivity for specific benefits. An example I would like to quote here is in mobility, in urban mobility, they are actually replacing the streets by smaller roads and a lot of green around the city. And in what they are replacing, they are investing heavily into automated traffic. And there are interesting use cases there with 5G. You can have self-driving cars drive together. That saves energy. It actually saves also the number of crashes and therefore casualties. That's an investment in technology that is actually driving a smart city use case and part of a consistent resilience program. So first, have a vision, use technology, and think overall. That's my Singapore message. If we move to the next page, I don't have the clicker. So we don't have a clicker. So there is a next page. The next page is Chicago. And the Chicago page is about you need to figure out what are the right use cases. And sometimes they are not easy. So in Chicago, the city has actually created a group that is actually driving, aggregating the big players in Singapore, in Chicago, to figure out the right use cases. And a good example of that is underground mapping. So one of the big challenges in Chicago is work under the streets. Because when telco needs to come in, they dig a hole, stop the traffic for a while, and then it's not the right hole because there is an unexpected thing down below. How can you actually improve city management by actually having everybody share data about what is underground, so that when you come in, you can actually plan better. And therefore, this is fully aligned also as a smart city use case with a resilient agenda, which is a lower congestion, therefore lower pollution, and most efficient city in terms of cost and spending. Issue there, Chicago is, most of the cities, they don't have a lot of money to invest, and therefore they are struggling to actually find the way to scale. Remember my first example with Singapore, they have a lot of money to invest. Chicago doesn't. So my second point here is, if you want to scale resilience, you need to figure out how to fund the programs that will enable it. Third example, I really like it. It's how you can bundle as a mayor agenda a resilience objective with a smart city objective. This is a smart district in Finland, in Helsinki. It's called Kalatasama. It's close to the harbor. And the way the local mayor, district mayor, has described the program is, my plan is to provide everyone living in this district with 1 hour a day of free time. That is very interesting. This is fully aligned with the resilience agenda, because what can I do if I get 20 less minutes in transportation? Then I will have 20 more minutes to do something. And if I get better services, social care services, I will get some more time to do some more things. So this contributes to resilience, even if it's not directly resilience. And what's really great is that it links with everybody's objective. I can spend time, if I'm a student, to study or party, or if I'm a father, I can spend time with my children. So I can do anything I want with this free time. And this is very easy to read, very easy to measure. And it's a good outcome that you can provide to public and private agencies that want to contribute to that as a way to measure how you deliver to this objective. Third part, you need to have an intent. It needs to be under a very simple sentence, and you need to organize to deliver against it. Next example is about creating the future. This is a city of Riyadh in Saudi. It's very interesting in the Middle East because there are many changes in Saudi happening with different angles taken on people, how to develop the people, how to open the society. And they have actually launched, as well as prepare to post-oil, and therefore build resilient cities that will be able to be more energy efficient, consume less water, less energy, etc. And they have actually a plan to build 5 different smart cities in the country, each of them with different purposes. So Jeddah, for example, is going to become the smart city for Muslim practice. It's not resilient, but it's dedicated focus for this one. And they are going to open a new district north of Saudi Arabia, which will be more open for people, like a free zone or a giant park, depending on how you see it. But it's new economic growth in the new Saudi Arabia. So all of these 5 have a dedicated smart city agenda, but it links to the same resilience agenda. What is the country going to become once oil decreases, and therefore how to build something that will solve our problems about energy, about water, etc. So aligned to this big political objective. I have a second one, and I won't be late, don't worry. I have a second one on the region, which is what Dubai is doing for Expo 2020. The worldwide exhibition have always been a very good example of poor resilience, because you build them for an expo and then you drop everything and then everything turns back to garbage. Huge investment missed. In Expo Dubai, there is actually 2 parts of the plan. The second part is called the Legacy Dubai, and they're actually planning a new Dubai that will be the resilient part of the city on the basis of the expo. So as you plan your urban development, you can plan for developing your city as normal agenda and plan for resilience at the same time. It needs to be integrated. Last one, this is Johannesburg in South Africa. So how do you apply this to cities that are in really bad shape in terms of services delivered to your citizens? So Johannesburg is famous for electricity disruption due to poor planning. So they didn't plan for the right power plants. They didn't plan for the right distribution network. So everything is broken. There are new forms of cooperation happening between the utilities and the city, whereas actually they found a win-win mechanism, where the utility actually invests into a smart meter, smart distribution, etc., and the city recognizes the benefits of this investment in the procurement, and therefore it becomes less cost and better outcomes to the people. So it's smart city agenda, smart city use case in a resilience objective. And last one, before I hand over to Paris, Cape Town, also in South Africa. This is an example of poor resilience. Cape Town almost were out of water due to poor planning of water. So smart water is one of the typical use cases you look at when you look at smart cities, as the one that provide the best value and the most immediate return on investment. If they had a smart water initiative in Cape Town, they wouldn't have a resilience issue with what is happening to them. So for me, it's the same thing. It's technology powering an agenda. It needs to be at the political level. Needs to be investment. The right government needs to be in place, collaboration, public and private, and solve the issues where they are. Don't plan for small things that are very innovative.
Thank you, Nicolas. Yeah, let's turn it over. Let's zoom in on a city we all know well. Noémie is the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Paris. It's a relatively new job title in this world. And
Deputy. I have a boss.
Deputy, oh, sorry. Another new job title, okay. So how is Paris? You've committed to a program of resiliency. Tell us how this plays out, and Nicolas referred to having a vision for putting the various actors together, both in public and private, and how is Paris approaching its resiliency plan?
Hello. So yeah, I don't have much more illustrations than this one, so I'll try to be illustrative with my words. So the city of Paris became a member of the 100 Resilient Cities network that was actually created by the Rockefeller Foundation in 2015. So since then, we have been developing first a diagnostic of what were the main priorities and the main challenges that Paris was facing, which was a hard task because, you know, there are a lot of risk inherent to the urban network and to the urban system. So we organized workshops with thousands of people, etc. And then we just arrived with 6 priorities first that helped us then develop a resilience strategy that was adopted by the Municipal Council 1 year ago, actually exactly 1 year ago, 27th of September 2017. So I will just say about this resilience strategy afterwards, but one word about the diagnostic. So the first and the only challenge that was prioritized by all the stakeholders that we spoke with was social inequalities and social cohesion. Because in face of, you know, any type of crisis, even of a shock, you know, the importance of people knowing each other, being able to recognize each other, to help in case of anything like a heat wave or a flood or anything, the fact that you know your neighbor and the fact that you can, you know, help him or her in that case is really important. And in a city of Paris where everyone is practically anonymous, it's a big challenge. And then afterwards, I'll go quickly on the challenges, but there's a series of risks linked to the river, the Seine River. I'll say 3. First, too much water, so a big flood, what we call a centennial flood, which would have like a huge impact on the GDP, on the French GDP. 30 billion, a lot of people without access to water, without access to electricity. If you're interested in this potential catastrophe, the question is not if it's going to happen, it's when. Because all the specialists say it's quite clear that it's going to happen at some time. So if you're interested in that, there's a great study of made by the OECD on a centennial flood in Paris. Then the symmetric risk, which would be less water, like what we say étiage in French, I don't know, like a big drought that lowers the level of the water. And actually, scientists estimate that in 2080, the level of the Seine River will lower by 30%. So it's actually a big stress that in the long run is much more worrying than the flood risk, which would be more punctual. And then, of course, all the risks linked to the quality of the water of the Seine. To be able to swim for the Olympic Games in 24, but also, you know, to keep our environment. And another risk that was prioritized was air pollution, which 6,500 deaths in Paris only per year, premature deaths linked directly to air pollution. So, you know, we can't make this invisible. It's visible, and it's a great challenge for Paris also in the long run. It's the 3rd cause of death in France. Then afterwards, of course, all the risks linked to climate change, drought, heat waves, but also storms, flash floods, and everything. So how do we adapt our infrastructures to that? The risk of terrorism and of attacks that for us is really linked to social cohesion and all that comes with it. And one last family of risks or challenges, but we really wanted to put it there, is governance. And how do we, alone, a city or municipality, tackle all these challenges without, you know, talking to our neighbors cities, neighbors départements, to rural mayors, to all the components of Paris, the firms, the innovators that you all are, I think. And the definition of resilience that we use is really the capacity of the city to thrive and to be able to keep its development goals regardless of all these risks, stresses or shocks, like punctual or in the long run. And it's not like after a shock come back to an initial stage. It's really keep on developing regardless of these risks. So it's very different. It's just a new way to speak about urban development in many ways. So the strategy is composed of 3 pillars, 3 main goals. I'll be very schematic. How do we prepare the people? How do we create the conditions for conviviality and for care at the level of the neighborhood and at the level of the city? And then a second big goal, which is how do we adapt our infrastructure to climate change? How do we adapt the urban fabric, the materials, the grounds, the roads, the buildings? So this is a big one. And afterwards, there's this governance issue. So how do we bring all the collective intelligence that is here everywhere to help us, municipality, to tackle these challenges and to be stronger and to be more resilient? So I could take examples of all the actions that compose this strategy, but there are 35. I have 10 minutes and I think I'm almost over. So please go on the Paris website, paris.fr, and you'll have everything you need. The strategy is in English and French if you want to learn more about what we plan to do and also how you could contribute, all of you, because we are all concerned. Oh, well, if you live in Paris, or even if you don't live in Paris, you could find good examples and solutions that you can bring back to your cities and to your countries. Am I out of time?
Super. Maybe I'll just throw out one kind of provocative, hopefully thought-provoking question for both of you that's taken from the news, which is how can we think about resiliency vis-a-vis the failure of Autolib? And the bigger question, well, let's spin it positive. The bigger question of what comes in its place, creating, if car sharing is a goal, if electric cars, environmentally sustainable mobility is a goal of cities to be resilient, citing all the factors that you mentioned, how there are obviously lessons. I've heard the mayor talk about the lessons taken from it. You've got this system now. It's a bit of a hybrid situation where you've got leftover infrastructure. How do you use it? But what can that experience and looking how to solve that problem? Any thoughts about that and bouncing back from that first attempt at it and figuring out what comes next?
I can try a neutral one so that we don't get into touchy areas. I think one of the big questions cities have to make is who invests in infrastructure. So if you look at Singapore, I gave the example where Singapore is deploying the sensors, the network, etc., and they will provide services to operators later that can benefit from those data to have fleets of cars or fleets of things, etc. Give them the ownership and give them flexibility in how to reallocate. So that's probably one angle for providing, for preventing resilience issues on that, because then you can change and have multiple partners operating networks, etc. Could be an example of a way to go. If you want to do private side, because you don't have to invest, you need to figure out how to ensure that everything works smoothly from one to the other.
Maybe 2 things. So we inherit from a great infrastructure of electric stations. That is, of course, a great, a great basis that we can start on to develop new mobility solutions with the private sector. And actually, the mayor announced that, with all the different solutions that exist in free floating, etc., the Autolib solution and the public service linked to it would be maintained. And afterwards, if we just put the resilience lenses to that more generally, like to mobility systems, the fact that you have different type of solutions that you can rely on, the fact that you are flexible, if you don't rely on one mobility solution, but that you have other alternatives, that you can be, more redundant, is also, a resilient quality that is important. So more and more we learn, I think, on how these systems work and how we can bring maybe more flexibility to them so that they can cope with the changes, and the mobility is really a network and a sector that changes very, very fast. So being able to face those changes and to adapt is a challenge for resilience and for Paris Resilience, of course.